Right. How are we all doing, folks?
All good, thank
Good,
you. How are
thanks.
you?
Can you all hear me and see me at least, yeah?
Yeah.
I
Good,
hear
good.
you.
Okay. As you know, this is our last night together. Didn't they write a song about that crap stuff? Jesus. In any case, before I start, um, I we have Declan Doran and Shane, I think, is coming online, and they would like to talk to you all first before I launch into my last barrage of stuff for the for this module. This being my last ever lecture this year. My God, the fun begins then. In any case, I'm going to go off screen and shut up, and I'm going to let Declan take over. Can you fire away, Declan, or can you hear me?
Absolutely, I can hear you good, Mark.
Perfect, Declan. Perfect. Right, folks. I'll hand it over to Declan for the next few minutes.
That's great, Mark. Thank you.
Thank you.
Now, folks, there you have it. Suckers for punishment. Go on and do another year for an MBA. I tell you, at €500, that's not bloody bad. I can for an MBA in terms of cost, But and you'll be delighted to know you won't be having me on that particular version of the program. We have the other executive version that's run on Fridays, and that's €7,500 worth of a program. But in any case, depends on what flexibility you want to have. So, where am I going? And before the messages and the questions and the comments start coming in, no, I don't have results yet. As I told you, things had to change and priority change, and there were still a number of extension submissions coming through and so on. But anyway, we will be getting around to them. Right, I need to move down to your lecturing area. And okay, and we need to open up our final suite, and you can all see that clearly enough, yeah? Yeah, good, 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 good. Right here, it's pretty much I won't say I suppose a recap of some of the stuff and a light touch. There's a few bits and pieces that I've added in as well for tonight's session. Just need to get these headphones working correctly. And yeah, I originally would have had a part one and part two, but I'm just showing part one. And if I find the set of slides that I also would have delivered on this program, it was about Brexit and scenario planning. And you say, why would you even bother? Because of the processes inside there. I just need to find the right set of slides. They're going back to 2018, which is, pushing on 3 years ago. And it's remarkable to think how companies still couldn't get it right, even being forewarned, forearmed, and so on. It's the fun and games right now is just, particularly in supply chain, is just remarkable. But as I said, we highlighted the problems, didn't act, be it on their own heads as such. That's the unfortunate side of it. But a lot of other companies saw opportunities and so on. So, to get the ball rolling for the first half of tonight, anyway, let's get started. So, what we're going to do again, just looking at the agenda or the points for tonight, the outlines. Look at some of this, the summarize some of the principles and just expand on some of these. Supply chain and analytics and big data. Now, I have a separate video that I did some time ago on, well, actually I didn't. No, I prepped it last week for yourselves. And I might show that, or I might appendix it to this recording. And you can have a look at it later on. We'll see how we're doing time-wise. Then we look at omni-channel, sustainability and supply chain. And, well, I'm going to fly through 3D printing. I mean, we've talked about that so many times. And then, of course, the last point being the supply chain management and talent management. Another name. Anyone, don't put up your hands if you're working in HR. It's just another one of these names, another concept that they introduce. By the way, when I talk about concepts, that's important for you particularly if you're going forward on MBA studies. Everything is a concept. 3D printing is a concept. Supply chain management is a concept. And you work around and get clear definitions of what the concepts are. And particularly inside track, when you're going to write your dissertations or your thesis in the second half of the MBA, when you clearly define what you're looking at and the concepts then you cut off all avenues for, but you didn't do this, Mark, or you didn't cover that, Mark, or you didn't mention this, and what about this and what about that? Sorry, outside the lines, outside the boundaries of what I wanted to cover. That's why understanding the use of terminology and concepts it's just good communications in any case, but they're particularly pedantic about these sort of things in academia. So moving on, we talk about these 7 principles in supply chain. If we look down through them here, you have segmenting your customers based on needs. And if you look across there, you see revenue growth, asset utilization, and cost reduction. I mean, that's the holy grail of business. More revenue, better use of your resources, and reduce your cost. Invariably, you add to the bottom line. It sounds simple, but then there are so many layers and processes and so on for that evolve during the course of a business that cloud a lot of these issues. The particular point of emphasis there on segmentation, customer segmentation, it would jump to that this is a marketing function, and that's often where the faults arise, not because of marketing. Now, nothing against marketing; they're fine in the other department. No. Marketing is fine. They segment their customers and maybe on spend, on orders and size and orders and that. The big customers, and then you might just have the one-offs and all that sort. That might all be very fine in marketing. But the real issue today is when we look at the 7 P's of marketing mix. We need to be able to offer these add-on services. How quickly we can deliver something, how quickly we can have something returned, reverse logistics. All of these mechanisms and things in our aspects of supply chain management are integral in the segmentation of your customers. So, for example, you might have some of your big customers might be up in Dublin, and you're down in Galway with your business. The cost of servicing them might not make it as lucrative as it might appear on the top, just because they're big spend customers. As I said, the cost of servicing those customers could be prohibitive, or it will lead into your profits. And a lot of companies take alternative strategies and maybe partner with a similar company in the same industry or same sector and offer the service, even though under the original company's name, it might be the other engineers from this other company that are going into service and so on. That's fairly common practice. And I'll always, I think I might have mentioned them to you before. Tommy, oh God, what's Tommy's second name? Plumber out in Tupperclare, outside Athlone. And I always remember him telling me that during the boom, he would not go outside a 50 or 60 kilometer radius of Glasson. And the work was being thrown at him, left, right, and centre, from much further afield, simply because he said, I can't get to you. You have a leak. And here's a chap. Talk to him and so on and so forth. It was just, he was turning down potential revenue simply because he wants to keep the quality of service at the right level for his immediate environment, his geographic location. And that simple concept and that simple approach meant that he came through close downs and the financial crisis and all that sort of stuff, with flying colours. So the key point being quality of service. So when you're looking at the extended 3 Ps, physical evidence, processes, and people, the talent management side of things, that becomes extremely important from the service perspective of your products. Okay, that's why this segmentation being done in conjunction with supply chain management or operations and with the marketing, the people. So you're looking at the whole package from the customer's perspective. Now you can take this a step further and you can use those models such as ServQual and the gap models again to identify what does the customer expect and what are we delivering as a company, as a collective in the organization. marketing, sales, finance, and so on, after sales services. As a group, what are we offering to that customer? What did they expect? And that's the perspective I would recommend you should be looking at it, certainly when you're segmenting the customers, because as I said, there are so many different parameters and variables. That's why this whole concept of big data becomes even more important. Customized logistics networks, and as you can see there, it's more leaning towards asset utilization, and that's just on the network, on the transportation side, optimizing transportation. Now it'll come up again in probably conversations will later on in one video clip that I have, but we've all at this stage ad nauseum have heard and seen and even spoken about, isn't that right, Will? The Ever Given, a couple of weeks ago in the Suez Canal, and
That's right. Yep.
and the interesting point was that, and I'll have to say to my shock or credit, whichever way you look at it, I did say that there would be issues around ports that will just move the bottleneck further down the line, and lo and behold, that's exactly what's happening now at the moment. But apart from that, it's great to prove yourself right. Apart from that, what also I've come across more recently, when I start to delve into these issues around the long supply chains, as we refer to them, and these ultra large shipping containers, vessels. Much and all as the on the surface, the transportation cost per kilo might be reduced because of such volumes being transferred on them. The transportation owners are actually telling the ships to slow down. And you might say, well, what's the purpose of that? It's simply to cut back on costs. The numbers of ships, and relatively new ships, that are actually being scrapped down around Indonesia and Pakistan and places. You might see these video clips of these massive ships literally being run aground, and then swarms of people coming in with angle grinders and welders and cutting the things apart and so on. Even ships as young as 5 years old, cruise liners, and I said, geez, this is an awful waste. Actually, it's more cost effective to get rid of those older ships or ships for the scrap metal, and also because of their inefficiencies. Some of the older cargo ships could take staff of or a crew of 70 people at a cost of in excess of 100,000 per person. And the newer ships, the likes of these, the Merck Oscar is one of these similar type class ships of 20,000 containers ships. It's got a staff, a crew of 12 from memory. I could be corrected on that. I'm pretty sure it's a crew of 12. Big jump down in terms of operational costs. And that's what they're driving at in terms of asset utilization. And this is even becoming more and more challenging for companies. And as I say, slowing down ships to be more economical in terms of the fuel they're using and so on. And that's again just kind of pushing to the outer limits of acceptance of delivery times and the order turnaround time from a customer's perspective. And we're already being conditioned into accepting longer periods of time because we know we're getting stuff from Taiwan, Indonesia, China, and so on. Therefore, we don't expect it. But the average shipping time for place from those destinations is about 20 days up to Europe, whether it is Rotterdam or Hamburg or whatever, and then it's just a couple of days after that for clearance and distribution throughout the EU. But again, as I said, asset utilization, it's in Rotterdam, there's hardly a person to be seen. It's fully automated technology again. And whereas in their Engbo, I think it's the name of the port in China, it's just a massive people and machineries and lorries running around the place, loading and offloading product or containers. So asset utilization, again, it's getting return on investment. And then if we move down to listen to the market signals and plan accordingly. that's become really interesting now. I'll defer commentary on that because there was a really excellent point from this Wall Street Journal video clip about large shipping containers and so on. But it's fundamentally observing and being in touch with consumer behavior. And of course, this has been exacerbated by COVID. I'm sure you, me, and half the country have been on Wish or Alibaba or God knows what else, or even other websites. Even if it is only getting your groceries delivered, but generally speaking, onto other websites to buy stuff, literally buy stuff. That's becoming the norm. People have gotten used to it. So, and signs of it. What's after happening today? Carrefour and Warehouse has now, they closed down last year in the UK. 500 odd shops or so. Here in Ireland, I don't know what is it, 50 or 60 shops, but 500 staff, 490 staff. But again, because of consumer trends, we've just been behind the curve a little bit. But people are doing more and more online, and the way people are buying products fundamentally has changed. There was one interesting statistic about online learning, for example, that what was expected to be happening over the next 10 years happened in 2 months. So that's that, and that gives you a clear indication of how quickly things can happen in terms of people's behaviors and the new norms, to use that horrendous freaking expression. In any case, and then moving on, differentiating products closer. In operations, we would refer to that as mass customization. And again, classic examples would be the likes of Dell. You buy a laptop from Dell, they're getting 30, 50,000 of those per day coming into, well, is it into Poland now? When they were getting them into Limerick anyway, years ago, process hasn't changed. They were getting them in fairly complete state, and then you just add the final bits, size of processor, maybe the disk or graphics, the last changeable components were added in the production lines in Limerick. And same for many other products as well, whether it is cars, defer it to the last minute. And in some cases, allowing customers to even make changes during, so they'll have the final cutoff. This is the last point at which you can make a change in your car specification. It's already gone into production and so on, and therefore no more changes can be accepted, blah, blah, blah. But that's the kind of thing to basically have as much of the skeleton, completed skeleton, until the last minute, then make the final customizations. And sourcing strategically, again, is part of the cost reduction. Inevitably, everyone is going to jump China. Let's go to China and get it cheaper and so on and so forth. And I to this day, I would advise to think twice. Sure, you'll get it, but at a more cost-reduced price. Well, you would have. They're still highly competitive. But the cost of transportation has just gone through the roof, obviously. Lack of containers. Why? Because containers have been stored during these pandemics and lockdowns as such. Product have been left on containers. They're not moving as fast. So there's a scarcity of containers alone. The handling of containers has gone up dramatically. There are all sorts of figures out there, anywhere from what used to be around $1,500 to $4,500 per containers. That's conservative. There are instances of up to $16,000 per container from $1,500. That there's serious price increases, and you're bringing them into a distributor and onto a wholesaler, and you start marking up your margins on that. So 40% for a wholesaler on the landed cost, then another 40%, give or take. So the product price is usually, could we say, made up of about, the landed cost is about 20%, and then 40% for wholesale and 40% for retail. So there's you might say, geez, these are phenomenal margins, but remember, they have to put them on shelves and that's and all the associated costs, and still have to make a profit. So in terms of the products coming in, it's always worth looking at closer, and there are more risks with these long supply chains. And clearly we've seen with the Evergreen Ever Given ship fiasco or problem that it was 6 days of a delay. And the knock-on effect will be weeks in terms of products, but it will be a couple of years before we start to see any kind of normality coming back, if at all. My best guess would be we won't see going back to $1,500 per container. And the reason for it is consumer behavior. We've gotten into this new way of doing things, or we've increased what we were doing previously at a phenomenal rate. So there will be a lot more traffic on the on the seas. That potentially leads for problems, issues, disasters, and so on. You know, another couple of ships stuck inside in the Suez Canal, and again, the whole thing, it's a serious bottleneck. There are even plans, or there have been plans around for a number of years, of developing a competing channel, a canal through Israel. Would it be worth a while? Absolutely. If you consider that the average cost of moving a ship through the Suez Canal can be as little, that's not the average. The lower price is about $150,000, going up to $300,000 and beyond, just to your ticket price to go through the Suez Canal. Anyway, these are all issues around that need to be considered when you're looking at sourcing your raw materials or components and so on. We're facing into that type of situation with one company, and what I've suggested to the company is ring around to the different embassies with on the eastern side of Europe, and ask for a list of companies or the equivalent to the CSO in their countries, and try and ascertain a list of companies that would be in your industry or in your space that could be potential suppliers, and literally do some desk work, find out, and then get on a plane eventually and fly out there and get to talk to these companies, because the trade-offs can be far more effective. If you're dealing within the EU, obviously you don't have tax issues, customs and excise, so you're going to reduce those costs. You have a little bit more cost in terms of the transportation mode, but at least you'd have shorter distances and the turnaround times, which means that you can actually reduce your warehousing, because you don't need one of the issues, say for instance in sourcing now with China, is that they will wait until they have a container full before they'll dispatch anything. Otherwise it's waste space, costs money, and so on. So and now they're dealing in volumes of items. I'm gonna always get confused. It's AliExpress. I think it's AliExpress for business. You go in there, if you look for a sample, they don't give you a sample of half a dozen or so. They'll give you several 100,000 of a sample. It's remarkable, but that's the kind of way they do business. And if you have to take in those large quantities, invariably it's going to mean warehousing and all the associated costs. Whereas if you source locally, your turnaround time, stock obsolescence, and so on decreases. You run those risks. Again, thorough evaluation, the what ifs, the scenario planning. Then develop supply chain strategy or technology strategy, pretty much self-explanatory, but what systems are you using? Are you using SAP? Are you using handheld scanners? What other technologies, RFIDs, and so on? Are your systems talking to one another? Are they generic systems? And what other technologies can we use? In other words, what can we hook into to gather more information? SAP Business One version 10 at the moment has got an add-on called HANA. I know some of you might be familiar with it or not, but it's a phenomenal dashboard type system with a hell of a lot of more interaction in it and real-time access to data. A lot of it is there already in version 9, but that's the type of technology we're moving towards. But it's even getting better. You're adding in, and the dreaded artificial intelligence, machine learning types of technologies are sitting on top of these systems, on the more advanced systems. All very fine for large companies, and I mean SAP to upgrade from version 9 of Business One SAP to version 10, you're not going to see much change out of 40,000 euros. So for a small to medium sized enterprise in Ireland, that's pretty much cost prohibitive. But then again, it's a matter of choice. What's the volume of business you're doing, obviously. So, and then adapt channel spanning measures, and that literally goes across all the channels in your business, how you're accessing all your different customers and the different types of customers, in your business or in your sector, and the efficiency. So it's like having a product line for each product type, and a dedicated network for each of our transportation or delivery mechanism for each customer type, for each product line. And you say, geez, Mark, you're not half making life more difficult for ourselves. But that's the way business is going. The holy grail is satisfying customers, giving them what they want, when they want, and how they want it, and so on. So you need to put the structures and mechanisms in place to enable that. We're looking at upgrading a website and in one company, and the issue is, do we leave it? Can we open it to general public for retail? And we can't, because we have agreements with retailers as a wholesaler. We have agreements with wholesalers, and the last thing the retailers want is to be competing against a wholesaler, because, for heaven's sake, they can reduce instantly by as much as 40% and prices. So what's the point? So putting the mechanisms in place to excite the customer, but redirect them. And you're seeing a lot of websites now say find local stockers. I mean, they've been around for probably 2 or 3 years now anyway, but you can find, click down here are your local suppliers at national level and then local level and so on, which makes perfect sense. But having access to those websites or those customers, so the brand supplier can actually see the volumes and the movements of stock within each of their partnered or recommended retailers. Then they can actually say, yes, Mark, you can buy this particular product above up in Selbridge or over in Nace. There are 24 items left still in stock, but they're moving at this rate. We're selling at the rate of 4 a day or 5 a day. We expect that stock replacement should be in place within next week, and there may be a newer model coming out, this sort of stuff. So that's the kind of information, not to defer my purchase, but to move stuff along so they can see the price sensitivity. New version coming out, let's start dropping prices down before we're left sitting with stock on our shelves that we can't move, and so on. All those types of activities and initiatives that are taking place in many companies. So looking at this supply chain, now I'm going to fly through this because, as I said, I have another presentation, but suffice it to say that there are really only 3 levels of this. I mentioned this to you before. Excuse me. You have raw data, however it's collected. Once it's aggregated, 2 pieces of data, some way aggregated, will give you information. And it's the way we play with the information, the way we use the information, that will ultimately give us an understanding of what's happening. We begin to see patterns, trends, categories, and so on. And ultimately, that understanding leads to knowledge and experience. I talked about that before as well, and it goes into a little bit more detail in the other presentation. But that's really where we're trying to drive. So to get our heads around what's happening out there, getting as much and how much information can we assimilate as mere mortals. Have we covered off everything? Have we thought of everything? What about this? What about that? And so on, so on, so on. So the more information you have, the better understanding. Excuse me. It's simple as simple does. If you want to learn more about supply chain management above and beyond what we were talking about here or over the course of the last 12 weeks, you go and you'll Google it, or you'll read about it, or you'll start taking up journals. I know some people will be totally fascinated with this stuff, can't get enough of it. and will want to spend hours on end reading about supply chain management, like I do. Well, I do actually, but anyway, it's again, if it excites you, you will learn more. And this is just a kind of a maturity type model. Now, it's simple on the surface, but mark my words that this type of structure will become an industry norm, and you'll start to evaluate companies and their supply chains based on this type of structure. And so the more mature supply chains in a particular industry or sector or group of companies, they're at the cognitive level. They're able to almost foresee the future, and they're able to adapt in advance before they and predict what's happening and make the changes, because they know from all the data and from the analysis, the information they've compiled and the trends they've seen. They're able to they have this knowledge, and they're able to respond or move in different directions and so on. That's the high cognitive strategic level of big data in supply chains and so on. Ultimately, because if you think, as I said, the supply chain is about getting a product that meets a customer's needs. Supply chain is in the thick of all of that. Of course, you have the product design, marketing, all these things, but the whole thing put together is your supply chain. Give the customers what they want. And this is just a descriptor of those maturity levels. So if it's just pure descriptive, you have 10 items of stock, 10 items in stock, that's pure descriptive, alerts and notifications. And we have, we might have a database, and we might run some queries. How many items do we have in stock of this particular product, and so on. Then we start to look at these heuristic and forecasting and simulations and statistical analysis based on what we have and what we've used and the probability of something happening and so on. And then the prescriptive, stochastic and scenario planning. What if? Again, pure and simply optimizing best situations and prescribing courses of action based on different scenarios, provided you have the detail in the scenarios. And I will dig out that, and I'll upload it. You can look at it yourselves. But it's a way of checking the different scenarios and making sure that you've got the right risk assessments of the variables being used in the different scenarios that will underpin your final decision. So it's like putting all the ingredients into a mixture and eventually coming up with something. I'll add a little bit more here and sweeten it up, or I'll add a bit more salt and whatever to take this the harshness out of it, or whatever the case. That's the type of thing we're filtering and filtering and filtering. Now, again, the biggest challenge you have in all of these is time. You could spend an inordinate amount of time testing and verifying and so on and so forth. The most obvious example of that right now, vaccinations, and of course the development of vaccines, how quickly developed compared to previously, in terms of years and multiples of years, to develop medicines and so on. Look how quickly we've this. Look how quickly other countries are rolling stuff out, and so on, so on. It's and you can be quite sure that Philip Nolan, up across the road over in Maynooth now, is looking at all of this kind of prescriptive stuff and feeding this back to NIAC. Well, if you tweak it here and say, make it from the 55s to 60-year-olds, do this and this, all they're doing is just number crunching on all this sort of thing. Sometimes they get it right, a lot of times they get it wrong. In any case, that's fundamentally what they're doing. And eventually, you're looking at these learning systems like Watson's Analytics and so on, IBM's AI type systems. So the systems themselves will start making calculations and predictions and course of action that should be taken. So it's moving away from the human. Why? Because we couldn't possibly assimilate the information, not even with an army of statisticians. The systems are so powerful they can do all of this for us. That's really what it comes down to. But but I won't rant on about the vaccination thing. I think by the end of this week I should be getting I should be able to get into the portal and get an injection. Or I'll go down to some back street in Dublin and get an injection. Anyway, so big data and supply chain. Again, just the primary goal of big data is to help organizations better understand the information that resides within the data. and to focus attention on those factors that are most relevant and making well-informed supply chain decisions. Pretty much obvious, but it's the getting of the data and making sure or understanding that you've got all of the information, or as much of the information. And oftentimes another element to your information will also be your intuition, your gut feeling. And you know yourselves, you'll have those situations where you feel that I'm missing something here, there's something not right, and blah 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 blah. Machines will do some of that for you, but invariably because of trends, past experience. So we've gone from the knowledge level to experience in terms of the human side of things. You know, or you have a feeling that something isn't right, or you're missing something, and you're reticent about a particular course of action, because invariably you feel you're missing something, or obviously something is not right. And I would say implicitly trust your gut. If something is telling you, the usual story, if it's too good to be true, then it is not true, as such. And it's the same with data. So understanding these systems are important, such that you have I won't say trust in them, but assurance in what they're spewing out in terms of their dashboards and all this sort of stuff. So big data can be thought of as the process of accumulating, organizing, and analyzing very large sets of data to identify patterns, trends, and so on. So the big data, weather trends, for example. The old expression, one swallow doesn't make a summer. But then you go out a couple of nights later, you see 2 or 3 more summer, and then so on and so forth. So yeah, we can see a trend. There are a few more. It's really that simple. We begin to see, and we can say, yes, we can predict now based on a trend. You have it in Excel. You can put trend lines in, but most of the time it's pretty obvious the way things are moving in an upwards trajectory. Throw a trend line in there, it just jumps out at you. Yeah, it's not as steep as you'd like to have it, but nevertheless, in terms of sales, it might only be going up, and you'd like to see it going up like that. Trend line, but that's what we're alluding to, adding another meta layer on top of what we already know or can see for ourselves. So omni-channels. What are omni-channels? And this is where I'm going to have a bit of fun. Where am I? Where is it? Yeah, here we are. We'll do it from here instead.
Anytime, any place, anywhere, there's a wonderful world you can share. In the right taste, the bright taste of the right one. That's Martini.
Anytime, any place, anywhere. You remember, some of you might be of the vintage to remember Cinzano and all those famous ads back in the 70s and so on. And as you could see there, good old Catholic Ireland, you couldn't make a kiss on the screen. But in any case, that's what it comes down to, your business, your omni-channels. And here it is, a single channel straight to your customer, getting all sorts of products out to multi-channels, and of course the multi-channel here, or the omni-channel. In terms of concept, anytime, anywhere, anyhow, or any device. On web technologies, when you produce something, is it mobile friendly? That used to be a big issue 6, 7, 8 years ago. Now it's default. It had better be mobile device friendly as such. Remarkably, you still have some sites that don't automatically cater for that. It'll ask you, do you want to, this is desktop version, would you prefer mobile version view and all that. I find that fascinating that they haven't cottoned up to proper uses of technology. But that's fundamentally what it comes down to in terms of the accessibility of customers to your products and being able to buy them literally on the move. But from a supply chain side of it, is being able to pick up on all of these channels and be able to deliver to the customer. Sometimes, where was its example? the guy was ordering a printer part or something, a part from his computer, and the company actually, yeah, he had to take it, get a taxi to a flight, so he couldn't have it delivered to his house. And we're talking about a matter of hours in terms of delivery. And the example was that they were able to follow the taxi and coordinate a drop-off point, and hand over the product. I mean, now that was advanced omni-channel and customer delivery service. So he had his piece part before he even got to the airport and got onto the flight and so on. God, where did I see that? It's a couple of years old, seeing that example. It was just fascinating in terms of the lengths that companies will go to meet customers' needs. Doesn't work in all products, obviously. So some of these strategies that you might want to look at for omni-channels. One view of the customer, regardless of whether it's in a store or internet purchase. So again, pretty much there already. A customer is a customer, whether they're coming in by fax, telephone orders left on after hours machines, through the internet, through the phone, and so on. As far as the company is concerned, it's a customer, and that's what we're looking at, regardless, but responding and getting as much information about the customer so as we can put that customer into the right channel as such, and make sure that we're delivering the right product, and our supply chain meets those different channels. Short-term forecasts based on understanding of what, where, and when customers buy. Trends, patterns, behaviors. Professor Pete Lund, Economic Research Institute, big into this topic, has grown in the last number of years, or field of study, behavioral economics. And that's fundamentally, you've seen them several times probably talking about people's behaviors in relation to COVID protocols and all that sort of stuff. Same guy talks, he gives some fascinating insights into people's behaviors and response, and there's all sorts of games that you can play to identify people's patterns and trends and behaviors as well. But fundamentally, it's trying to identify personalities and behaviors and get an insight into that, and therefore we can match our production and supply chain to those trends from understanding more and more about people. Video analysis became one of the more prevalent fields of study to be able to get insights into people's behaviors. Seamless order entry and order management, we already have that. One click, you go in, or they'll come back to you and say, here are the products that you've seen before. Do you want to reorder? One click button, yeah, and bang, it comes in, a week later or 6 weeks later, whatever the case may be. Or they might know the rate of consumption and already send it out to you. Like having your if you're subscribing to Netflix at the moment, you're paying your 10 or 12 euros per month. Well, it's the same for products. Now we can see that Mark's consuming this amount of product on a per monthly basis or per weekly basis. Let's put it all together again and send it back out to him until he cancels or changes his mind. So one view of the inventory for real-time inventory status availability at all stock points. So we know exactly what we have, when we have it, so we can, now we're into the innards of operations. So we know what products, and adapting lean approach right across the board. Lean it's excellent when it's working, but the challenges with lean and agile, lean specifically, is that if something goes wrong, it can go horribly wrong. Again, factoring in some levels of safety stock will always be a way of working, to be honest with you. To give you maybe a half an hour or an hour or 2 hours production. And why would we pick those particular or specific times is because we know that if that particular machine broke down, it could take 2.25 hours to replace or repair on average. Therefore, should we go for that level of stock to keep us going for 2.5 hours production or 2.5 hours and keep and then catch up? What is the elasticity of our production process should something go wrong? So having that kind of buffer, again, you only know by collecting the data. You know the performance of machines. We're already doing this. We're looking at service records, so the systems, your own car will tell you when it needs a service, generally speaking. Same type of principle here in this. You know that the faster you drive, harder you drive, the quicker the service is going to come up in rotation. One view of inventory. So flexible fulfillment network in terms of delivery options, meeting personal or seasonal patterns, and handling returns. So it's even gone beyond just seasonal. It's almost hitting to the individual level of in terms of the omni-channels, and also in segmentation of the consumer, how to get the product precisely to that person at the right time, at individual level. We're getting there. There's again, it'll depend on the type of product you're looking at. Store operations that replace many different fulfillment center operations while maintaining the focus of being a retail store. Retail stores, to be honest with you, if they aren't already on the way out, they will be on the way out. That's pretty much. Well, why would you think I'd say that? Any?
The way out though is Amazon not going to bricks and mortar now as well?
Distribution center. We're talking about the pure retail stores.
No, but they're opening up retail as well, are they not? Are they not opening up like grocery stores and things like that?
They are.
Yeah, they can be.
They lose huge amounts of money though. Those retail stores that Amazon have, they lose.
But it's not good to be in front of your customer too, like, you know what I mean? Just have a direct presence. Like, you know, are they not doing that to compete with the likes of Apple stores and things like that, where they have a direct presence in front of their customers, and you know, like, I don't know. I mean,
Yeah.
I think maybe Amazon maybe is not the perfect example, but
possibly not. But
can't see all retail stores going the way of the dinosaurs. People want tactile experience, want to go in and try something on, and you know,
Open your bike.
creative products, right? Things like
Yeah.
I don't know.
That's precisely what I'm alluding to, Colin. Stores will become the experience centers, and by that I mean you go in exactly as you're saying, Colin, there, and Pori, the customer's going in to have a look at the product, touch, feel, and size, for example, and then go home and order. Or they may just put the order through on their mobile phone there and then, or even if you're using some Bluetooth technology, press your button, and as you leave the store, say, yes, I'll take that product in that particular shape, size, and so on. So using that where was it? If, for example, not that I would frequent these stores, but Chanel and places like that, if you went into their stores, they might have one item of product under different product lines inside there. Usually because they cost an absolute fortune for starters. But apart from that, just to go in and have a look and feel, they don't carry large stocks of anything inside their shops. It's purely just a window display. So we've kind of hit that level, more so because of the costs of these premises. I mean, look at Grafton Street, you know, one of the most expensive streets in Europe, probably in the world still, you know, it's well up there, just for being present. But you will find retailers heading in that direction, if not already there, purely for the experience. And then all the fulfillment is done through their distribution centers, back orders, or the backroom work, so to speak, will be done through their distribution centers.
But do they not need to still own those premises then, Mark, even for the experience piece? So why not carry a bit of product there as well and sell on like what you can? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Just you know, more of a question than that.
A lot of places wouldn't want to own them in the first instance because of the cost. If at best they might rent or lease. and simply because they can get out of business quickly. That started happening in the late 90s with all the telecoms and IT manufacturing companies, particularly the telecoms. Because remember these 3G licenses, they were costing hundreds of millions. And for the operators to compete, they couldn't do it alone. And raising the money. So a lot of operators partnered with their suppliers. So for the suppliers to raise the cash quickly enough, most of them sold all their premises, including Ericsson and Athlone, for example. They sold on all their premises, buildings and facilities, and rented them back from the facilities management companies. And one of the scares at the time was that, oh Jesus, they've sold everything. That means they can leave the country, at the drop of a hat. Yeah, technically they can, because they're not left with a building that will, smashed windows in 6 months' time and all that sort of stuff. But that's why the costs of having these places have just become almost prohibitive. So optimizing space and real estate is it's questionable. And of course, then again, you have your technology is improving an awful lot. With virtual environments, virtual shopping, and so on. So you can, in some cases, you can pick your products and put it into your own house. Is that new? No. One of the first sectors to start adapting to something like that was in the beauty salons, where ladies could go in and get their hairdos superimposed on themselves and different colors and so on. That was probably one of the first applications of that type of technology. Sit in front of a PC, take a picture, and change styles and all that. And it's moved on tremendously. Now we're into virtual reality, so you can actually bring in your own environment and say, I'd like this new piece of furniture. How will it look in the house? Or what if I change the walls? Dulux do it. You have an app for your phone, I think, and you can scan your room and you can superimpose it with the color that you were thinking of choosing, so you can get an idea of what the room will look like. So it's become far more immersive and interactive. That's why the technology has become such a key point. So store operations in that respect is it'll still, and most consumers, certainly consumers under 35 years of age, give or take, a lot of them go into stores, look at what's available, and then go out online and look for something similar or the same product at a lower price. That's kind of practice, and it's been going on for a number of years. I certainly know all my own kids would probably operate like that, because they feel that if they buy it in the stores, they're paying store prices, and that they're exaggerated, and therefore they feel they're getting a better deal when they get something on online, which they always do anyway. It's going to be more cost effective. But nevertheless, the key point, as Colin was saying, tactile, look and feel. We still need that. Goes back to the old days of buying a car. Go in and kick the rubbers on or kick the tires. See what they're like. Yeah. So how are we doing time wise? Right. Okay, we're back to the final stretch, and kind of nicely leading into this last section on sustainability, 3D printing and talent management, but more importantly, the sustainability. I'm just going to unleash this other video, which I picked up from it was Wall Street Journal there a week or so ago, but relevant to the issues we've spoken about earlier on tonight. So I'll just let this rip for you.
An average of 30 container ships has sat anchored daily just off the coast of Los Angeles this year.
The normal number of container ships at anchor is 0 to 1.
This ship, the
Can you not hear it?
not to be confused with the now famous Ever Given, was waiting for 13 days.
Seeing vessels at anchorage outside the nation's largest container port does not happen every day. And it is a once in about a decade situation that we see.
Everfront was part of a bottleneck supply chain that's still straining the neighboring ports, which handle about a third of all US imports.
I don't think it's an exaggeration to say that the ports have never really seen this confluence of stresses that they've had to deal with.
So, what's causing this offshore queue? How do these waiting ships impact customers onshore? And when will it return to normal?
I think we got here because we all had to stay home.
Experts say if there's one cause for the backup, it's COVID-19.
Staying home leads you to go, all right, my desk isn't great if I've got one, my chair isn't comfortable even if I've got one, I might need a new computer monitor, I might need a webcam, actually I can't go to the gym, so I'm going to go buy a Peloton or a running machine or some dumbbells.
For many Americans, that has meant placing online orders for those items, most of which aren't made in the US. Seaborne imports to the US started surging in the late summer as manufacturers and retailers tried to rebuild inventories that were depleted by shoppers in the early months of the pandemic.
We had 57 extra ships arrive in the fall above normal levels, which choked the system because at that same time, the goods movement system ashore, the terminals, the trains, the trucks, the warehouses, the forklift drivers had some fraction of the workforce out with COVID and a different fraction out because of contact tracing. So just when there's more cargo, there's a less efficient goods movement system ashore, so the ships backed up.
But shipments continued, peaking in February when 177 container ships carrying more than 800,000 containers arrived at the Southern California ports. That's 31% more ships and 49% more containers than the same month last year. This gap highlights a related issue. The ships are getting bigger.
There's been a significant increase in the number of the very biggest boats that come in. And whilst they're very efficient when they're at sea, they're a devil to unpack and a devil to park. And so it takes longer to get all of them sorted out.
So, the ships continue to wait an average of 7.5 days before reaching the port. And that means consumers are waiting too.
Okay, Peloton, let's go.
This is something buyers of Peloton bikes may already know. The company said in its latest earnings report that backups contributed to recent shipping delays.
I'm sure you've seen that on a lot of e-commerce sites. It's taking longer than normal to deliver to you. And so, there's that kind of customer disappointment angle, and companies will then need to think, okay, how do I avoid that in the future?
Peloton, come on, let's get this workout started.
For Peloton, the answer has been to spend more. The company said it would spend $100 million in transportation, including air shipments, in the first half of the year to get around the bottlenecks at the port. Mom and pop retailers also have products they'd hoped to sell stuck on these ships, and many of the smallest shops can't afford to fly products in instead. But the ships aren't the only issue here. The entire supply chain, from ports to warehouses to distribution centers, is inundated with cargo.
So if the cargo is not moving quickly from the ship to the shore, out through the warehouses to the consumer, everything else is going to start to back up.
This congestion, which was driven by demand for shipping, also means that the cost of shipping has gone up. The current global average shipping rate is nearly 4 times what it was in January 2020, according to data from S&P Global Platts.
Someone's going to pay for that. It's either going to come off companies' profits or they're going to pass it through to consumers. The longer it lasts, the more likely it is that consumers are going to pay it.
At the ports, workers are pushing to get the anchored ships moving.
Pre-pandemic, we were welcoming, on average, 10 container vessels in to work at the port, loading and unloading containers every day. During this surge, we've been averaging 15 vessels working every day in the port. That's a 50% jump in productivity alongside our vessels every day.
Soroka says the port's short-term strategy focuses on vaccinating workers, maximizing efficiencies.
Has that been the case for everyone? Not being able to hear it?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Stick a link up or something? Is it publicly accessible?
No, not this particular piece. But
stick it up on Moodle, no?
Yeah, I will do. I'll stick it up. It'll be up. It'll be in the recording anyway. You can jump straight to it. I'll put in a timestamp onto the recording. Hang on, I'll just kill this now. I'll put a timestamp onto. Where is it? I'll put a timestamp onto the recording so you can go straight to it. But it's Yeah, it has a lot of crap. Information that I was talking. I know why. It's Zoom. Zoom won't allow third-party stuff come through half the time. It blocks out. Automatically stops the music.
If you stop and then
Yeah.
reshare, then it does.
Yeah, I won't at this hour of the night, but the key points I suppose about this is the consumer behavior. That was the fundamentals from that piece of video. You saw the names of the ships and so on, and that interesting point that they made about, well, you didn't hear it obviously. The Peloton machine. You see these advertised on TV, those home exercise bikes. They're a couple of grand to buy to have, but they're a subscription basis. That's why they have decided to spend 100 million in transportation costs to airship in their products to get them out to consumers, which was a bit of a bold initiative on their behalf. But it'll just give you an idea of the size of the market that their products have, because they're advertising virtually everywhere and anywhere. Interestingly, the same company nearly lost its shirt about a year and a half ago because of the advertising they had used. It was yes, it was a Christmas ad, and this guy bought the Peloton bike for his wife, and time forward, and she had lost weight and so on, and you can imagine there was phenomenal backlash over the inference of the husband buying a bike for the wife to lose weight and all that sort of stuff. But there was some serious. They lost their share value went way down. If you had been fast enough to buy some shares, it picked up again. But in any case, the point being that they spent 100 million just on shipping. The scroll up there with the desks and computer tables and chairs and all that, it was simply a fact that you're sitting at home during pandemic. People are talking about, I could do with maybe a new chair or a new webcam or whatever the case may be, and they were ordering all this online. So the volume basically has gone up of material stuff, as I just call it, on being purchased online. And you could see a couple of the evergreen fleet there again. They alluded to the very start, or showed the start of the situation with Suez and so on. But then, exactly as I had said 4 weeks ago now, Will, you can correct me, 3 weeks at least, that the bottleneck would be shifted to the ports, and that's precisely it. In other words, Suez had only exacerbated what already was happening at each of the ports, the queues, the backlogs, and so on of ships trying to offload products and containers. But that's fundamentally what it is. It's just it's a synopsis of the impacts of consumer behavior and primarily the use of e-commerce. Again, just one of your omni-channels to buy products. And that's what the fundamentals of that video clip were. It's just interesting to see some of the stats and just to give some visualizations of primarily what happens at the various ports and so on. Apologies for that, why sound didn't go through. Anyway, doesn't matter. There is an interesting feedback to you. Let me see. Just let me give a quick check. 18 out of 34 responses on that quick, simple survey. 50% response rate. Is that good or bad? Well, tell me in a year's time when you've done your dissertations, when you have response rates on your surveys that you send out and so on. In any case, it's all feedback is valuable. Right. Starting to wrap up the last stretch. Sustainability. Again, as I say, these things gather momentum. Okay. Again, it's only my opinion, not the opinion of the college or anyone related to the college other than myself, that we tend to get a little bit too hissy-fitted about some of this stuff. Now, some of you might be, oh, how can you say that? And so on and so forth. And some people say, the bottom line is literally the bottom line when it comes to profits in an organization. Not at any cost, not at flagrant cost, but these issues tend to. You've heard the expression "first world problems." That's essentially what we're coming down to. And now you get various groups and subgroups and parts of society go off on a campaign on this, that, and the other thing, and so on and so forth. Fine, it's free speech. Do what you want. Knock yourselves out, people, or whoever. You know, it's it doesn't particularly bother me. Yet I would be a practitioner of a lot of this stuff through common sense and common approach. But nevertheless, companies tend to exploit those type of things. That's the real point I'm getting to. They'll exploit and jump onto bandwagons of behaviors and trends in society as such. And you know, the earlier ones would have been the free trade and so on. So that's fine, makes sense and all that. And then the green agendas and so on. But they become the issue I would have personally with these type of things is, you know, there are so many other countries that are so far behind the curve, and yet we go for the easy pickings of, you know, the restriction of engines and this, that, the other thing here in Western Europe and so on, where there's far more serious problems in rainforests and so on, and pollutions and so on, that and other, you know, societal issues that you daren't even attempt to. I mean, you won't get not just by way of example, you won't get LGBT activists running around the streets in Moscow or in Arabic states. They wouldn't last too long, pure and simply, you know. But they'll become more vocal elsewhere. You know. But look, nevertheless, it's there. It's the environment we're living in. You adapt or not. And this is the whole point about this. Now, the real point on this, on sustainability, is looking at circular economics, the way you can source your materials and reuse. That's really what it comes down to. How much the product can we take and put back and reuse and reuse and reuse the components of obsolete products to reduce costs. And if we look at it here, we have regulation, risk, reputation, and profit, and so on. And we know all the examples and the cases of, you know, particularly in clothing and manufacturing, you know, polluting rivers in India and of child labor and all that. They're the extreme cases. You know, they're extremely unfortunate, but it's the way things are done, unfortunately, in many cases. But nevertheless, companies will exploit them insofar as they can. They'll exploit the legislation and the rules in other jurisdictions, and will justifiably do so, as long as they're able to make profit. Because again, it's the shareholders that are driving these. You know, it's almost speaking with you know, how the both sides of your mouth at the same time. You know, oh, I'm interested, you know, child labor, blah blah, and this, that, you know, what's my share value today in Nike, or and just by way of example of companies that might have been in those kind of sticky situations previously. So legislation, do you have more generalized, more global legislation, and so on? That's where you start to layer with all these various summits and so on, so forth, going to trying to have some kind of global legislation or regulations, and getting companies to buy in and subscribe to set standards across the globe. But if we look at these here, the 4 R's, you know, reuse, remanufacturing, reconditioning, and recycling. These are all the elements we spoke about before, and of course embedded in that is this the whole concept of reverse logistics. How do we get the stuff back? Can we factor that in? And you know, we do have the legislations on electronic goods and so on and so forth, and pay surplus charges or fees, whatever, for disposing of products and so on, which enable a lot of this sustainability and safe usage. Health and safety becomes involved, and so on, so on, so on. But the whole point about it is, as a company now, are we looking at new ways of designing our products? Are not new ways, but looking at ways of designing our products with reuse and recyclability already built into it. The life expectancy of our product, and then how much of it can we reuse? But more importantly, how can we get it back? How can we get these components back? I use the example of Heineken. They're extremely effective certainly in Holland, about collecting bottles and reusing the bottles, and again, rather than having to go to the cost, and they'll identify, you know, their carbon usage, their electricity, light, heat, and all that sort of stuff. If savings in terms of not having to use new bottles all the time, for example. And most of the car manufacturers or heavy manufacturing organizations recycling, reusing the energy, heat and water and whatever else they're using, not only for themselves but local communities and so on and so forth, will benefit from any of their excess resources, such as heat and hot water and so on, or electricity. And this kind of feeds into what I was saying there about the reverse logistics sides of things. And key observation, you know, global supply chains. So the longer the supply chain, the more complex these reverse logistics processes become, and the complexities of at what point is it in at country level, is it at more a European level, is it at a global level that you want to be able to pull back all your products, and then what are the costs of pulling back or having products sent back to you? I mean, let's face it, if you buy something on site and Wish, you're not going to return it. You know, apart from the fact of the time alone, it's hardly worth it, because we're getting it at a relatively cheap price. It's easier to go off and order a new product again. But if you have a faulty fridge or washing machine and so on, you'll be down to your local store where you bought it, or Harvey Norman's, or whatever the case may be, immediately, and have them come up, collect it, and if not repaired, replace it. So those kind of short legs of the reverse logistics work relatively effectively. Again, it will be all dependent on the type of product and so on. And as I said, the cash value and of the technology you want to use, you know, cash value from the returns, and the power of technology has not yet received enough emphasis in return flows. I think that's a bit of an unfair statement to say that it hasn't. It's been very much at the center of enabling reverse logistics and the growth of reverse logistics. And I did mention the example of one particular component or product that I bought, and making it so easy for me to return it, and having the replacement product sent out to me before I actually put the return product back in the system, into the reverse flow itself, which was exceptional customer management from the company's perspective. And actually it was through Amazon and as an aggregator for the original supplier. So the systems are there. Some of them are working exceptionally well, and that's why I say, you know, when you're looking at case studies, for example, in one company, what one country is doing, or what one company in a different sector is doing, are there elements of that can be borrowed and migrated? That's why it kind of feeds into this whole area of big data. As practitioners, we need to be able to look at what's happening in other industries and say, can we learn from that? There was the process for, in operating theaters, I don't know if there are any doctors or nurses on this course, probably not, but people, there was an issue, oh God, now it's only come to me now, where you'd have to perform a tracheectomy inside in an operation when you're under anesthetic and so on. And there was an issue around, anyway, people there were some deaths because of this. And the normal protocols, you'll have the consultants or the surgeons, then you'll have the theatre nurses, and then orderlies, or whatever they call nowadays, and so on. So there's a hierarchy inside there. And this particular nurse, a male nurse, suggested, and the guys, because of I'll call it the arrogance of their position, said, who are you to tell us what to do, and so on and so forth. And the solution was a tracheectomy. And how were they going to solve these problems? And what happens then? You know, the patient was wheeled down in their trolleys, and they hand over to the intensive care unit, and so on and so forth. And one particular consultant I think it was aviation, came up with a solution for the hospitals in this case, and said, like, you work as a team. Not everyone knows everything, and therefore people should be allowed to interact. And it worked extremely effectively. And he looked at the whole process of what they did in preparing an airplane to fly and so on for the process and the crews handing over and this, that, and the other thing. And the bottom line in that type of example, I know it's a little bit hazy because I'm trying to remember all the details. It's a number of years ago. I was just fascinated about the approach that was taken to it. The bottom line was that it said, for example, for serious complex operations, so on, that the whole team, consultants, nurses, and doctors that performed the process inside in the hospital, they moved with the patient into ICU and so on. So there was less issues around, handing over between different machines, the data and all this sort of stuff. So the team moved with it. So the team became the conveyor belt rather than the patients on the conveyor belt run through the teams and so on. So they moved that. And another one of those type of examples was thinking outside the box. In the manufacturing of 747s, they put those on, for all intents and purposes, a conveyor belt. Previously, they were stationary. Why? Because they were so big, and so you had to get the different crews operatives in to do their various parts on the machine. But they said, right, let's move it. So it moves something like a couple of feet per day down through a huge hangar, and the crews themselves. So the reverse of what I was saying about the theater, the operations theater, they did the reverse, and it improved efficiencies in terms of churning out these planes and so on. But it's interesting, as I said, having these, using the technology. So it is pretty much there. It's just limited to I suppose the use, and that's why I say look at other areas, other industries, and other sectors to see what you can borrow from their ways of doing things, and implement it in your own environment. Customize it or modify it. So reverse direction needs scrutiny and to control and reduce. Of course, you need to, again, it's the data, the rate at which stuff is coming back in. And you already have indicators you can predict because you have the data, the failure rates of certain components in products. Therefore, you can then anticipate or be some way prescriptive or cognitive of the levels of product that will be returning, and almost down to the time frames and the sequence as to which they'll be probably being returned to you. So again, taking the data and analyzing and looking at it and say, are there other things that we can learn from what's happening in the reverse logistics? When I teach project management and we talk about coming to the end of a project, and we release a product out into the market, and that's it, project is disbanded and so on and so forth. Many years ago, we changed that process in some companies, well, in the companies that I worked with at the time, and we had some of the design, the project team follow through into the follow-up phases of the project. What I mean by that, it's gone out into service, it's been used by customers, but the team of engineers that would have worked on the original product or service, whatever the case may be, they then became the support engineers. Why? Because they knew the product. So we were able to turn around issues far more efficiently and effectively. So they could spend maybe 6 months in that part of the post-release phase of the project, and then rotate back around into. But the fascinating side of it was the knowledge that they were garnering in that 6 months, because they were getting real feedback from customers about what was happening, and they were saying, hang on, this is either a genuine fault or potentially a new requirement or a new feature that we could build into the next generation and so on. So we were starting create these systems thinking approach inside in projects themselves. So we had these feedback loops coming back from the engineers who were now in follow-up or customer support, were feeding back into the system engineers or designers, as the case may be, to improve the product, constant improvements. And we actually measured how we were becoming more efficient at doing that, because we took data. We measured the processes from start to finish, and literally from cradle to grave. So then where are we going then? Increase reverse flows. So we have easy return as part of customer server policy, increased consumer recycling programs, and high obsolescence rates in technological products. Well, clearly we have a high obsolescence rate. Why? Because the rate at which products are coming out. Why? Because of the demand that's driving for these new features and looking at consumer behaviors. I've always used the mobile phone as an example. In my day, when we built these bloody things, and our first GSM systems was just to be able to make a call and send text and maybe send some data digitally. Now, what are they? They're entertainment devices. They're fitness devices. Making phone calls is so far down on the functionality list. It's almost they're almost prehistoric at this stage. So the form and function of what they're being used for, and that's how the products evolve. And knowing why and how customers or consumers are using it becomes extremely important. But the rate at which, because if you're introducing a new iPhone every 3 months, I mean, there will be mayhem in the market. So what do they do? Maybe once a year, give or take, or maybe 12, 14, 15 months, they'll come out with a new iteration of the product and so on. And they'll just hold back enough functionality to make it exciting enough for consumers to want to upgrade. Nothing wrong. And if you listened on the news tonight with respect to Carrefour and Warehouse, people are not upgrading their phones as frequently as they used to. And part of the reason is because of the ridiculous costs of the phones themselves. You know, you're going into the hundreds and sometimes a couple of thousand for a brand new phone, and even that can be on a build system. So product frequency and release frequency and product roadmaps become extremely important in terms of what you're selling and putting the supply chain, the operations, and the functionalities into supporting each iteration of a product. That becomes a cost, clearly. 3D printing, I'm not going to spend much time on this, but it's because it's pretty obvious, you know, the advantages and disadvantages of it and so on. What else is really in terms of this? Longer terms, 3D printer technology has made display a key role in open source collaborations. Yeah, perhaps, you know, if you're, you know, having multiple material sciences working with engineering companies on a different side of the world, coming up with new products and replacing existing products with newer, more efficient ways or more efficient designs as such, then you can have those kind of collaborations in the 3D printing or supplying the materials. But we all know you can build houses now with 3D printing and God knows what else. You know, it's just limited to imagination. But it would be fair to say that we're not getting 1,000 miles away from, what do you call that in Star Trek? The Earl Grey tea machine, as I call it. I can't remember. It's a machine that, you know, whatever you want just appears in the dumbwaiter. Strategic, what? The replicator, yes. Thanks very much. That's it, yeah, the replicator. But so really, that's not far from what we're doing, you know, replicating. So making our own products and making our own. Sure, we're already doing it, for heaven's sake. What's the cost for a printer now? A 3D printer, 180, 200 euros, and a bit of plastic and so on, so you can make some small components yourself, you know. Anyway. So if we look at in terms of 3D, you know, again, demand driven, I don't need to go through all of these, but the sustainability, reusability of the product. So, you know, technically, if you're making something out of plastic and it breaks, what's stopping you from melting down the plastic and reusing it again or without having to super glue the stuff together, so you can still have the rigidity of whatever the case may be, you know. Workflows, value chains, decentralized supply chains, so you can partially make a product and some components can be made at home with your private 3D printer to find, so you do your own final customization. These are all things that can be happening, but certainly will be happening, you know, down the future. Again, as the technology becomes more affordable and there's more uptake in all of these different technologies. Small batch capabilities, you know, you can print 2 or 3 and you don't have to buy your full dozen. I only want 8 of these products, or I want 11 of these products, and so on. You know, here's the spec. There are companies that actually purely develop the, oh God, what's the name of the files? But you can buy the design file and the program that you just...
Step file, is it?
Hmm?
Step file.
Yeah, something like that. You can buy them online and they'll send you the program. You'll upload it onto your printer or your computer and it'll print the product for you, kind of thing. And that's where they're making the money. It's nice. They're around about 5 or 6 years, those types of companies, you know. other than you having to go down and try to take the measurements yourselves and digitally and trying to come up with the component. They'll have it done for you. Service replacements and parts. And finally, the last part, as we're hitting into the supply chain talent management. And again, what can I really say about that is, the whole area has become very, very specialized. Right across the supply chain, back in the day, a storeman was worth his weight in gold, and if he went out sick, all hell broke loose. Not nowadays, because everything is so technology driven. Anyone can go and get it. But that said, you're looking at a whole. We have another program running inside there, and I know there's something on Springboard as well. There is a version on data analytics. Again, someone with a data analytics background or qualification or understanding moving into transportation, for example, or network planning. And so it's becoming extremely specialized. And, in the last number of years, you would have supply chain vice presidents and all that sort of stuff, senior roles inside an organizations. But they could come from any one of the engineering backgrounds, generally speaking. And of course, you have right. You're doing a postgraduate in this. If you go to the Irish Institute of Purchasing and Materials Management, they'll run a master's. DCU run a master's in this, only in supply chain management again. And then you can specialize down within particular areas of that as well. And that's where it's driving towards it. You will probably find that if you want a job in supply chain management, that you'll have to have a qualification, something like the PMI or PMP, as in project management. Starts out pretty loosely, and before you know, within 15-20 years, you have to have a certificate that you have to renew every year and show that you're developing and improving your competence in your field of studies within that particular area. And that's the way this is moving as well. When we had when I was working in as I say, in the real world, there was a colleague developed a master's in project management down in UL, and even after 2 years on that master, he still told the students, go and do the PMP or PMI accreditation program. And if you're going for some of the very large companies, multinational companies, if you're going in with, say, for example, for a project management role, and unless you had PMP, you could have the masters, but unless you had PMP, you weren't even getting inside the door for an interview. No matter how good you were or what grade you got on your masters, unless you had PMP. There was, in Motorola many years ago, when they were in full flight, in their product department, as in product sales and technology products management, product managers roles, you had the entry requirement was an MBA, and down on the bottom was it AMBA, so the Association of MBAs approved, because there is a snobbery amongst MBAs, as it happens, and if that wasn't ticked, the admin staff in HR, if that box wasn't ticked, you didn't get in the door for an interview, because everyone inside the place had MBAs, and there were, as I said, top-notch MBAs, and so you're just another small fish in a big pond, after spending a couple of years of hard study on an MBA program. But that's the kind of thing. This will start moving in that same direction, if it hasn't already done so in many industries. You won't get in the door into some of the very large, the Mercks and places like that, or stowed into their supply chain logistics area, unless you have some kind of qualification in these areas. So deploy a proactive combination of career guidance, challenging assignments, while providing compelling supply chain advancement opportunities via logical career paths, retention strategies, and succession planning. That's where they would like to be. It will get there. It will get there. And if you look at linking people, now this is generic. This just doesn't apply to supply chain. This is any part of an organization. And the key point here, linking people strategy to business strategy. And that's precisely what I wrote my own dissertation on. Here are people in an organization. These are their competency sets. And if you get the right competency sets of these people and you work them through these particular projects and processes, you're improving the performance of the organization, which in turn hits the strategic objectives and so on. So there's a cascade. What are the objectives? Therefore, we need to develop people at this level, and we need to have the right projects and processes in place that they can demonstrate through their project work or whatever it is that they are acquiring or improving on their existing competency levels. And that's pretty much what this kind of describes as well. You know, top management team effectiveness, clarity, cascading of clarity of goals and so on, organization transformation. Quite simply, an organization is improving, and that's why we have these maturity models. You probably came across some of those in your strategic management module, but there are a number of different maturity models. We alluded to one there in terms of data, perception, prescription, and cognitive. That's a maturity model. We have them in quality circles. We have maturity levels inside there. What's that crowd? The Bambridge, is it, or something like that? It's an American system again, in terms of, we have it in CMM, capability maturity modeling, which started out only in software engineering but has migrated out into a whole range of industries. So how good are you at your various processes? You have what's the other one? Not ISO. Geez, I can't think of it. But parallel to the capability maturity modeling for organizations, and so they in parallel developed a capability maturity model for people, and it's called PCMM. So how you're improving, how people are improving the levels of competency maturities that they can attain within an organization. And then, of course, recruitment, and what's this other point up there? Board effectiveness. Of course, the board effectiveness. That's a kind of, what's the model? Balanced scorecard is another one of probably one of the better known models around there. Again, it's talking about people, processes, and effectiveness, and achieving strategic objectives. Another framework. These are all just frameworks, but they give some kind of form and structure. In other words, they try to make sense of all of this grey stuff that's around us, the grey areas, as I often refer to it. Put form and structure onto it so that we can understand what's happening in our organization and what we need to be doing, and future-proofing our organization. So that's it, folks. That's just the summary. You know, a shortage of qualified supply chain talent requires proactive supply chain talent management process to acquire, develop, and retain key individuals. Clearly, that could be supply chain, it could be finance, it could be project management, it could be operations management, sales and marketing. The same model, same fundamentals apply no matter what part of an organization you're looking at. It's all about continuous development, professional development in organizations. And if you're lucky to be in a place that supports and fosters that, then you're on a winner already. So folks, let me go back to where I want to be. Get up. And so there we are. That's pretty much it. What time have we got? Not bad. 21:06. Okay, folks, listen. I'll let you go. You're more than welcome. Take it easy. Bye.
Thanks, Mark.
All the best of luck. Best of luck.